The outer rim of the galaxy was a vast and desolate place, filled with ancient ruins and forgotten relics of civilizations that had long since vanished. It was a place where only the boldest explorers dared to venture, hoping to uncover the secrets of the past. For the Galactic Union's archaeological survey team, this particular mission was supposed to be routine, a simple scan of an uncharted planet, a barren wasteland that showed faint energy readings beneath the sand. But what they found was beyond anything they had ever imagined. As their ships descended through the thick, dust-filled atmosphere, the team caught sight of something enormous, buried beneath layers of sand and rock. A ship. No, a fortress. Its metallic surface was ancient and weathered, yet unmistakably advanced. Strange markings, unfamiliar to any known species, adorned its hull, and despite its apparent age, there was still a faint hum of power emanating from deep within. Cautiously, the survey team landed their crafts nearby. Clad in protective suits, they moved towards the colossal structure, their boots sinking into the soft, golden sand. The air was eerily still, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. They activated their scanners, trying to analyze the structure's composition, but the readings made no sense. The metal was unlike anything cataloged in Galactic Union records, far denser, stronger, and more advanced than anything even the most powerful civilizations had created. With a hiss, they pried open the corroded outer hatch and stepped inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, their lights flickered, their equipment momentarily glitching. The interior was massive, with towering corridors lined with strange, faded symbols. Dust swirled in the dim light as they moved deeper, their footsteps echoing through the hollow remains of what must have once been a mighty warship. Then they found it. In the heart of the ship, past control panels long dead and passageways filled with debris, there was a single intact stasis pod. It stood in the center of a circular chamber, surrounded by inactive machinery. Unlike the rest of the ship, the pod was still operational, its surface smooth, untouched by time. Inside, frozen in suspended animation, was a figure, a humanoid. The team exchanged nervous glances. Humanoids were common across the galaxy, but there was something different about this one. His build was powerful, his armor a design they had never seen before. And then there was his face, so similar to their own species, yet somehow more defined. The lead scientist hesitated. Could he be? The others shifted uncomfortably. It was impossible. Humans were a myth, a terrifying legend passed down through history. The elder species, the first great civilization that had once ruled the stars, until they vanished without a trace. Some claimed they had destroyed themselves in a war too great for even their mighty power to withstand. Others whispered that they had ascended beyond mortal existence, but all the stories agreed on one thing. If humans ever returned, it would change everything. Despite their fear, their curiosity won. With careful precision, they activated the pod's control panel. The machine hummed to life, hissing as ancient mechanisms released their hold. The ice on the glass slowly melted away. A sudden gasp filled the chamber as the figure inside jolted awake, eyes snapping open. The man stumbled forward, collapsing onto his hands and knees, coughing violently as his body adjusted to being awake after what must have been millennia. His breathing was ragged, his muscles trembling, but there was strength in his movements. He looked up at the aliens surrounding him, his dark eyes filled with confusion. "Where am I?" His voice was hoarse but firm, his language unlike any they had heard. Yet somehow, they understood him. The lead scientist swallowed hard. You are aboard a Galactic Union survey mission. You were found in stasis. On this ship." The man's gaze sharpened. He scanned the room, taking in the surroundings. His expression darkened. This was my ship. Panic rippled through the team. If he was telling the truth, if this truly was his vessel, then that meant only one thing. He was one of them, one of the elders, a human. Before they could react, alarms blared through their communicators. The Galactic Union Command had received their report and immediately sent orders. Detain the humanoid. Bring him in for questioning. If he was what they feared, he could not be allowed to roam free. Da-hyun, as the humans had once called him, saw the shift in their stances. They were afraid. He understood why. He didn't remember much, but he remembered war. The last battle. The decision to put himself into stasis. The enemy. Who were they? His memory was still fragmented, pieces missing. But he knew one thing. The war wasn't over. Before he could act, the aliens activated their energy restraints, locking him in place. He didn't resist. Not yet. He needed answers first. They took him to the Galactic Union's central station, deep in the heart of controlled space. There, the Union's highest officials debated his fate. Was he a threat? A relic of a time best forgotten? Some argued that he should be studied, his DNA examined, his knowledge extracted. Others warned that if the stories were true, then waking him could doom them all. But while they argued, the Jorvax Dominion was already making its move. The Jorvax were a brutal, war-hungry empire that ruled vast territories through fear and military strength. They had long sought to dominate the galaxy completely, but there had always been one legend that haunted them. The story of the elder species, the one force that, if it ever returned, could challenge their rule. Now that legend had become reality. The Jorvax leader, General Torvak, saw an opportunity. If he could capture the human, he could harness whatever ancient power his species had once wielded. If he could control him, he could use him as a weapon to cement the Jorvax's rule over the galaxy. And so, they struck. The Galactic Union Station's defenses were strong, but the Jorvax were ruthless. They infiltrated the station, bypassing security with terrifying efficiency. Within minutes, alarms blared, lights flickered, and chaos erupted. Da-hyun had been silent up until now, watching, waiting. But the moment he saw the Jorvax warriors storm into the halls, his instincts took over. In a flash, he moved. The guards assigned to watch him barely had time to react before he shattered his restraints, his body still weak but fueled by an unbreakable will. He grabbed the nearest weapon, a simple shock baton, and in his hands, it became a tool of destruction. The Jorvax warriors had expected resistance. What they had not expected was him. Da-hyun was a force of nature. His movements were precise, lethal. Every strike was calculated, every counter flawless. He moved through the corridors like a ghost, taking down enemies with a speed and ferocity that defied belief. Within minutes, the attackers were in full retreat. The Galactic Union forces, who had initially tried to contain him, now watched in stunned silence as he stood among the fallen Jorvax, breathing heavily, his eyes burning with something they had never seen before. Determination. A single human had just done what entire armies had struggled to achieve. The Union's leaders could no longer deny the truth. The elder species was real. The stories were true. And this man, this warrior, was living proof. But Da-hyun wasn't interested in their fear or their debates. He turned to them, his voice steady, his words carrying the weight of a forgotten past. I need to find the others. Because he knew, deep in his bones, that he was not the only one. Others had been put into stasis. Others were waiting. And if they were waking up now, it meant the war humanity had left unfinished was about to begin again. And this time, he would make sure they won. Da-hyun stood in the cold, sterile chamber of the Galactic Union's central station, his mind a storm of confusion and purpose. The walls around him hummed with alien technology, but none of it felt as advanced as what he remembered. What little he could remember. Pieces of his past slipped through his mind like fragments of a shattered mirror. But one thing remained clear: the war. The fire. The fall of humanity. He stared out of the observation window, watching ships drift through the endless void, and his heart ached with questions. How long had he been asleep? What had happened to his people? and who had won the war that had driven humanity to the brink of extinction. The sound of approaching footsteps broke his thoughts. A woman entered the chamber, Jaya, one of the Union's lead scientists. Unlike the others, she didn't look at him with fear. Her dark eyes held curiosity and something else, respect. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, her voice calm but urgent. "The council is in chaos because of you. Half of them want to lock you away. The other half thinks you're a weapon." Daihyun's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "They're both wrong. I'm a soldier, and I need answers." Jia hesitated, then nodded. "I'll help you, but you need to understand, humanity is a myth. You're a ghost from a time no one believes existed. The more you reveal about yourself, the more dangerous it becomes. Then let's make it dangerous." His eyes burned with determination. "Tell me everything." And she did. Jaya showed him the archives, holograms and ancient data files that painted a picture of humanity's long-lost legacy. They had been the first to conquer the stars, their technology so advanced it bordered on magic. They built cities on distant worlds, created ships that could tear through the fabric of space, and forged weapons that could crack planets. But then came the war. No one knew who the enemy was, only that they came without warning and with overwhelming force. The records spoke of fire raining from the heavens, of entire worlds turned to ash. And then, as quickly as they had risen, humanity disappeared. Some believed they destroyed themselves in desperation. Others whispered of a last stand that no one survived. Dahyun closed his eyes, and memories surged, ships burning, soldiers screaming, the deafening roar of orbital bombardments. He saw flashes of his comrades, their faces blurred by time. And he remembered a plan, a desperate final attempt to preserve their species. "There are others," he whispered, his voice tight with conviction. "I wasn't the only one put into stasis. There are more of us, scattered, hidden. If I woke up, they might too." Before Jaya could respond, the alarms began. The station shuddered violently, and the lights dimmed. Through the observation window, Dahyun saw them, the Jorvax fleet, sleek, black ships bristling with weapons. "They're here for you," Jaya said, her face pale. "The Jorvax believe the return of humanity is a threat. They'll either capture you or kill you." Dahyun's jaw tightened. Let them try. The station descended into chaos as Jorvax strike teams breached the outer hull. Dahyun moved like a force of nature, his body remembering combat his mind had barely begun to recall. He tore through their ranks with terrifying efficiency, using their own weapons against them. Jia stayed close, guiding him through the twisting corridors. "We can't fight them all," she warned as they reached the hangar. "They'll overwhelm us." "Then we don't fight," Dahyun replied. He pointed to a sleek, Union scout ship. "Can you fly that?" Jaya's eyes widened. "You want to escape. Where would we even go?" He pulled a small metallic device from the pouch at his waist, something that had been with him since he woke. It pulsed softly, a rhythmic beacon calling out into the void. "I think this is a locator," he said, "for one of the hidden outposts. If we follow the signal, we'll find answers." The ship's engines roared to life as they launched into the fray. Dahyun took the co-pilot's seat, his hands flying across the unfamiliar controls with surprising ease. The Jorvax ships closed in, their weapons locking onto the fleeing vessel. "Hold on," Jaya shouted. The ship twisted and spun, diving through the chaos with breathtaking speed. Explosions bloomed around them as the station's defenses fought back, but the Jorvax were relentless. A plasma bolt clipped their wing, sending the ship into a violent spin. "We're not gonna make it," Jaya cried. Dahyun's eyes narrowed. "Yes, we will. Give me control." Without waiting for permission, he took the controls. The ship responded to him like it was an extension of his body, and with a sharp maneuver, they slipped through the enemy line. The beacon pulsed faster, guiding them toward an uncharted sector of space. Hours passed as they traveled, tension heavy in the cockpit. Jaya finally broke the silence. You really think there are more of you out there? I know there are. His voice was quiet but certain. And if they wake up, the galaxy will never be the same. The beacon led them to a barren moon orbiting a gas giant. From the surface, it looked desolate. But as they approached, a hidden hangar opened, welcoming them inside. The ship settled with a soft thud, and the silence that followed was oppressive. Da-hyun stepped out first, his eyes scanning the ancient facility. It was unmistakably human, sleek, powerful, and dormant. As they moved deeper, they found a control room still faintly humming with life. Jaya activated the systems, and a holographic map flared to life. There, Da-hyun said, pointing to a cluster of signals. Stasis pods. Hundreds of them. Before they could react, the hangar's security systems activated. Defense drones emerged from the walls, targeting the intruders. Da-hyun moved fast, his instincts driving him forward. He destroyed the drones with brutal efficiency, but they kept coming. Find the override, he shouted to Jaya. I'm trying. She yelled back, her fingers flying over the console. But this system is ancient. I don't understand half of it. A blast knocked Da-hyun off his feet, pain flaring through his side. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself up. He wouldn't die here, not before finding his people. Got it, Jaya cried. The drones powered down instantly, the room falling into silence. Da-hyun staggered to her side, his breathing heavy. The map still flickered before them, and Jaya highlighted the strongest signal. That's the main outpost, she said. If there are other humans, they'll be there. But before they could set a course, a new alarm blared. Jaya's face drained of color. The Jorvax. They tracked us. Da-hyun's eyes hardened. Then we make sure they regret it. As the first enemy ships entered the moon's atmosphere, Da-hyun knew one thing with absolute certainty. The war that had destroyed his people was far from over. And this time, humanity wouldn't fight alone. The vault was a tomb of forgotten giants. Da-hyun's footsteps echoed through the vast chamber, his breath caught somewhere between awe and fear. The massive room stretched into darkness, lined with sleek, ancient machines and towering stasis pods. The air was thick with the hum of dormant energy, power waiting to be unleashed. Jaya stood beside him, her eyes wide as she stared at the silent war machines. This is impossible, she whispered. This technology, it's light years beyond anything the Union has. Da-hyun didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the row of stasis pods, their glass surfaces frosted over, but still intact. He stepped closer, his pulse quickening. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, and in one of them, a face stared back at him through the ice. Hanyul, Da-hyun breathed. The memories hit him like a storm. The last stand. The desperate plan. Hanyul had been one of the best. A soldier, a friend. Seeing her face after so long, unchanged and peaceful, felt like a lifeline in the madness. We have to wake them, Jaya said urgently, but Da-hyun shook his head. Not yet. The Jorvax are coming. We need defenses first. They moved quickly, activating the vault's ancient systems. Screens flared to life, filling the chamber with soft, blue light. The language was human, and Da-hyun's hands flew over the controls, waking machines that had slept for millennia. The walls trembled as long-dormant weapons powered up, and the air thrummed with growing energy. Then the stasis pod hissed. Frost melted away, and the glass slid open. Hanyul's eyes fluttered, and she gasped as if breaking the surface of deep water. Da-hyun was there instantly, catching her as she stumbled. You're safe, he said softly. You're with me. Her eyes focused on him, and the shock turned into recognition. Da-hyun, she whispered. Before he could answer, the alarms blared. The Jorvax fleet just entered the system. Jaya called out. Dozens of ships, maybe more. They found us. Da-hyun's jaw tightened. Then let's show them why they should be afraid. The vault came alive with a vengeance. Turrets rose from the ground, their barrels glowing with ancient energy. Drones swarmed into the air, sleek and deadly. As the Jorvax ships descended, the first barrage of human firepower ripped through the void. The sky above the moon became a battlefield, and the Jorvax learned fear. From the command center, Da-hyun watched the carnage unfold. Haniel stood beside him, already fully alert and assessing the situation. "We need to take the fight to them," she said. "There's a warship in the vault, still intact." They found the ship in a massive underground hangar. It was unlike anything the galaxy had seen, sleek, black, and bristling with weapons that hummed with restrained power. "Can you fly this thing?" Jaya asked nervously. Da-hyun's hand brushed the control panel, and the ship responded instantly, lights flickering to life. A slow smile crossed his face. "It remembers us." As they launched into the chaos, the warship moved like a predator unleashed. Jorvax vessels fell before its guns, their shields useless against weapons designed for a war long past. Haniel manned the targeting systems, her precision devastating. But then the transmission came. It cut through the battle. A signal so ancient and powerful that even the ship's systems trembled. The voice was cold, mechanical, and terrifyingly familiar. "We see you." Da-hyun's blood ran cold. Haniel's face went pale. "The enemy," she whispered. "They survived. The war that destroyed humanity wasn't over. It was only waiting." And now, it had begun again. The void burned with fire and wreckage. The Jorvax fleet descended like a storm, black ships blotting out the stars as they unleashed destruction. But the humans were ready. Da-hyun stood at the helm of the ancient warship, his face calm despite the chaos. The controls responded to his touch like an extension of his will, and the ship moved with deadly grace. Haniel's voice crackled through the comms. "Enemy ships closing in from the port side. 20 vessels. Let's give them a warm welcome," Da-hyun said, his eyes narrowing. The warship's cannons roared. Streams of energy lanced through space, striking with pinpoint accuracy. Jorvax cruisers shattered under the onslaught, their hulls splitting like paper. Drones poured from the ship's bays, sleek and fast, weaving through enemy fire and tearing into their ranks. In the command center, Jaya watched in awe and terror. The humans fought like nothing she had ever seen, precise, relentless, unstoppable. "They're falling back," she whispered. "They're regrouping," Da-hyun corrected grimly. "They'll come harder next time." But the humans were ready for that too. On the moon's surface, the vault had become a fortress. Human stealth ships rose from hidden hangars, their cloaking devices flickering as they vanished into the void. AI-driven drones patrolled the perimeter, their cold, efficient minds calculating every possible threat. The galaxy had never seen this kind of warfare, and it showed. The Jorvax fell by the dozens. Their ships, powerful but slow, couldn't keep up with human tactics. Stealth ships slipped through their lines, striking from nowhere and vanishing before they could retaliate. Drones swarmed like hornets, overwhelming their defenses. The Jorvax had come to crush an ancient myth, and found a nightmare instead. But victory had its cost. Haniel's voice came through the comms, tight with strain. "Da-hyun, there's a dreadnought moving toward the vault. It's charging some kind of weapon." Da-hyun's heart sank. "We can't let it fire. Take it down, Haniel." There was a pause. Then Haniel's voice came back, steady and resolved. "I'll stop it. You keep fighting." The channel went dead. On the view screen, they saw her ship break formation, speeding toward the massive Jorvax dreadnought. Enemy fire rained down on her, but she never wavered. Her ship dove into the dreadnought's path, weapons blazing. The two ships collided in a burst of light and fire, and when the flames cleared, both were gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Jaya's hand found Da-hyun's, her fingers trembling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Da-hyun didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the empty space where Haniel had been. The war continued, The Galactic Union fractured. Some species pleaded for humanity's protection, desperate for the strength only they could offer. Others feared them just as much as the Jorvax, remembering the legends of human wars. The galaxy teetered on the edge of chaos. Amid the conflict, something else grew, something Da-hyun hadn't expected. Jaya stayed by his side, drawn to his courage and conviction. Their bond deepened, a quiet strength in the storm. But even as they grew closer, the weight of their people's return pressed down on them both. "We can't lose anyone else," Da-hyun said one night, his voice raw. "I won't let it happen." But the enemy had other plans. The ancient signal returned. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through every channel, every system. "We are coming." The war was far from over. It was only just beginning. The stars trembled as the Vorin arrived. Their fleet emerged from the void like a shadow, ships vast and silent, their dark hulls reflecting no light. They moved with an eerie grace, a mechanical inevitability that sent a chill through every soul who witnessed their approach. Da-hyun stood on the bridge of the ancient warship, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen. The Vorin fleet stretched out endlessly, a tide of destruction sweeping toward them. "It's them," he said quietly, his voice heavy. "The enemy we were meant to fight." Jaya stood beside him, fear tightening her throat. How do we stop them?" "We finish what humanity started," Da-hyun replied. The first engagement was brutal. The Jorvax Dominion, desperate and reckless, launched their entire remaining fleet at the Vorin, and were torn apart. Vorin ships moved with terrifying speed and precision, their weapons slicing through Jorvax cruisers like paper. Explosions bloomed in the void, entire squadrons wiped out in seconds. The Galactic Union fared no better. Their ships scattered, some trying to fight, others fleeing in terror. But there was no escape. The Vorin hunted them down with cold efficiency, their fleet pressing forward without hesitation. Da-hyun watched the massacre unfold, his hands clenched into fists. "We have to act now," he said. "If we wait, there won't be anyone left to save." He turned to Jaya. "Get me a channel to the Union Council." The council chamber flickered onto the screen, filled with shouting and fear. Leaders of a dozen species argued, panic breaking down their unity. When Da-hyun's face appeared, the room fell silent. "You've seen what we're up against," Da-hyun said, his voice calm but firm. "This enemy won't stop. They won't negotiate. They won't spare anyone. If we want to survive, we have to fight together." An older counselor, his face lined with fear, shook his head. "You're asking us to trust a human, an ancient warlord from a dead race. How do we know you won't turn on us once the Vorin are gone?" "Because if we don't stop them," Da-hyun said coldly, "there won't be anyone left to turn on." The chamber erupted again, but one voice cut through the noise. "I'll fight," said the leader of the Cylon, a reptilian species known for their warrior culture. "We've seen what the Vorin can do. We need every ally we can get." One by one, other species joined the pledge. Some still hesitated, but enough stood with humanity to form a fragile coalition. The final battle was coming, and they would face it together. Back on the warship, preparations began. Human stealth ships and AI-driven drones formed strike teams, their ancient technology more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Union ships fell into formation, their captains following Da-hyun's orders without question. In the strategy room, Jaya studied the data with growing dread. "Their numbers, they're overwhelming. Even with everything we have, we can't hold them back forever." "We don't have to," Da-hyun said. "We just have to hold them long enough." "Long enough for what?" Jaya asked. "For the rest of humanity to wake up." The ancient stasis vaults had begun to stir. Across the galaxy, hidden outposts came to life, their systems reactivating after millennia of silence. Human soldiers, engineers, and tacticians woke to a galaxy on the brink of destruction, and they answered the call. But the Vorin didn't wait. Their fleet advanced on the heart of the galaxy, a storm of darkness and fire. The first line of defense crumbled almost immediately. The second held longer, but not by much. The Vorin pushed forward relentlessly, their weapons devastating everything in their path. On the warship's bridge, the tension was palpable. Dahyun's orders came fast and sharp, his mind working at lightning speed. Jia watched him, awed by his focus and terrified by the weight he carried. Then the message came. They've breached the final line. Juan's voice crackled over the comms. We're falling back. His transmission cut off in a burst of static. Dahyun's jaw tightened. All ships prepare for close quarters combat. We hold them here, no matter the cost. The enemy was here. The final battle had begun. The battlefield was a storm of fire and death. Human warships, sleek and powerful, danced through the chaos, their ancient weapons unleashing destruction with terrifying precision. The Vorin fleet answered with relentless fury, their black, jagged vessels moving like predators through the void. Explosions bloomed against the stars, and the very fabric of space seemed to shudder with the violence of the fight. Dahyun stood on the bridge of his warship, his face set in grim determination. Focus fire on their forward dreadnoughts, he commanded, his voice cutting through the din of alarms. We break their line, or we die here. The crew obeyed without hesitation. Plasma cannons roared, and AI-driven drones swarmed into formation, striking with surgical precision. But the Vorin were endless. For every ship destroyed, 3 more seemed to take its place. They're pushing us back, a lieutenant cried. We won't hold much longer. Dahyun's jaw tightened. We hold, he said coldly. We hold until the end. On a smaller strike ship, Jaya prepared for the most dangerous mission of her life. Her team of human and Union soldiers moved through the cramped corridors, their faces pale but resolute. We get one shot at this, she said. We take out the Vorin command ship, or the battle's lost. The ship's pilot called out. Approaching target. Brace for impact. The strike ship twisted through enemy fire, weaving past beams of energy that carved through space. With a final burst of speed, they slammed into the command vessel's hull, breaching its defenses. The airlock hissed open, and Jaya led her team into the heart of the enemy. Inside, the Vorin were waiting. They were monstrous, tall, skeletal figures with gleaming, insect-like armor and eyes that burned with cold malice. The corridor erupted in gunfire as the 2 forces clashed. Move, Jaya shouted, cutting down an advancing Vorin with a burst from her rifle. We have to reach the control core. Back on the warship, the battle was turning into a slaughter. Human ships fell one by one, and the Union fleet was in full retreat. Dahyun watched it all, his heart heavy with rage and sorrow. Sir, the Vorin flagship is advancing. The tactical officer reported. They're targeting us directly. Dahyun's eyes narrowed. Then we take the fight to them. The ancient warship surged forward, weapons blazing. It punched through the enemy line, cutting a path straight toward the heart of the Vorin fleet. But the damage was mounting. Fires raged on the lower decks, and the shields flickered dangerously. Prepare for boarding, Dahyun ordered. I'm going in. His officers stared at him in shock. Sir, you can't. That's an order, he barked, and they fell silent. Moments later, Dahyun launched in a one-man assault pod, crashing into the enemy flagship. He emerged into the cold, metallic corridors, his rifle in hand, and his heart pounding. The Vorin came for him in waves. He fought like a demon, his movements swift and deadly. Every shot found its mark. Every strike brought an enemy down. But they kept coming, and with each battle, his strength began to wane. Finally, he reached the central chamber. The Vorin overlord awaited him, a towering figure wrapped in dark, flowing armor, its eyes like burning coals. You are the last, the creature hissed, the final remnant of a broken race. Dahyun raised his rifle. Let's finish this. The duel was brutal. The Overlord moved with inhuman speed, its energy blades slashing through the air with deadly grace. Da-hyun dodged and countered, his shots tearing into the creature's armor, but it was not enough. The Overlord struck him down, and pain exploded through his body. He fell to one knee, his vision swimming. The Overlord raised its blade for the killing blow, and then the lights flickered. Across the ship, Jaya's team reached the control core. "Set the charges," she ordered, her voice fierce. The Vorin fought desperately to stop them, but it was too late. With a final, deafening explosion, the core erupted, and the command network collapsed. The Vorin fleet faltered. Their coordination shattered, and they fell into chaos. Human and Union ships surged forward, seizing the advantage. On the flagship, the Overlord staggered. "What have you done?" it snarled. Da-hyun smiled through the blood on his lips. "We won." With his last strength, he drove his blade into the creature's chest. The Overlord screamed, and then fell silent. The battle was over. Hours later, aboard the human warship, the survivors gathered. The Vorin fleet had been destroyed, but the cost was staggering. Half the Union fleet was gone. Entire planets lay in ruins. And Da-hyun, he lay on a medical bed, his breathing shallow. Jaya sat beside him, her hand clasping his. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "You always were a terrible liar." Tears filled her eyes. "Don't leave us. We still need you." "You don't need me," he said softly. "You're strong enough now. Humanity is strong enough." He squeezed her hand. "Promise me, you'll keep them safe." "I promise," she choked out. His eyes closed, and his final words echoed through the room. "Never again." When the news spread, the galaxy fell silent. The elder race had returned, and their leader's sacrifice had saved them all. And as humanity rose once more, the stars themselves seemed to watch with awe and fear.